Welcome back everyone to Angela's Craft Room. Today I'm going to go through and show you the technique of watercolouring with the Stampin Up Aqua Painter. Now the stamp set I've used for this gorgeous flower here is the You've Got This stamp set. And this is the flower we've used. With this stamp set, it actually comes in 2 packets, so you get this really good background stamp as well, and it is quite a large stamp, so it's really good for a background stamp. So we'll just get started. Now this time I'm going to use Real Red as my base card, and that measures 8.5 inches by 5.5 inches, and I've scored it at 4 1/4. Okay, so I've done that. Now my first layer I'm going to have in Very Vanilla, which is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to have Tempting Turquoise on top of that, and that's going to measure 4 7/8 by 3 3/4. And then my flower is going to go on my shimmery white cardstock, which measures 3 5/8 of an inch by 4 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so the colours we're going to be using today are Real Red, Old Olive and Early Espresso. So they're the stamp pads I've chosen to use. I do have some ribbon out, but I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. We'll see how we go. So first, as this is going to be my top layer on my card, so that's going to go on there. I'm going to ink up my big background. Even though a lot of this will be covered, I'm just going to stamp this on this corner and this corner. On my original card I did it all the way round, so I thought this time, for a bit of a change, I'll just do it on 2 corners. So I'm just going to get, I might actually use Early Espresso this time. So I'm just going to stamp it up. Now I'm just taking my pad to the stamp rather than the stamp to the pad, because it's such a big stamp and this is quite a juicy ink pad. So I'm just going to, and as I say, a lot of this is going to, you're not even going to see it by the time we've layered it, but I'm just going to on that side. Then I'll just need to ink that up again. It's just a lot easier with these really big stamps that you take your ink pad to the stamp, and then I'm just going to, it will overlap a little bit, but a lot of it's going to be covered. So I'm going to go on this side now. And if you didn't want it as vibrant, you could always stamp off and then, so I'll just have a look with my next layer, which is Tempting Turquoise, whether I want to I think I'll just leave it like that. So I'll just clean my stamp in my stamping scrub. put it aside there. Then I'm just going to put that straight onto my card front. So just line that up with my grid paper. So hopefully I can get it on as straight as possible. Like that. It's quite striking, the Very Vanilla and the Early Espresso. So that's that so far. And then we're just going to put that as our second layer. I'm just going to put that straight on. So lining it up again. So you can see what I mean. Most of it's closed, but it just gives you that just bit of added dimension to your card when you're adding a lot of panels. I do love the Very Vanilla, and the Early Espresso just accentuates it a little bit more. So now we're going to bring in our piece of shimmery white, which I said measured 3 5/8 of an inch by 4 3/4, and we're going to just close that Early Espresso. We're going to stamp that up with our Stays On Jet Black ink. It Stays On Jet Black is more of a vibrant ink. You could use Memento Black, which is also available from Stampin Up. I wouldn't recommend just using the basic black when you're doing watercolouring. And just remember that even though we're using the Aqua painter, we're not watercolouring on watercolour paper. So we don't want to put too much, like really overwork the areas, because it will make your cardstock go a bit funny. So I'm pretty happy how that's stamped out. Like that. Then I think I'll just get the Early Espresso and just put my sentiment on the top now to get it out of the way. Just notice there's a little bit of ink on this end of my stamp there, so just ideal just to get a cotton bud and just remove that. So we just line that up. Make sure I've got my stamp in the right way. And that's all done. So now we're ready to colour. So I'm going to have some paper toweling here. And then we're going to use our Real Red Stampin Up ink pad. Now we just want to press that in at the middle to get a puddle. Sorry, that's moved a little bit. So we just need to do that. It's not quite enough there for, just squeeze it a bit more. So it's just got a little puddle there. So we just dip the aqua painter in. Now if it's a bit too wet, you just dab it on your paper toweling. And we're just going to start with the bottom petals. Just very lightly, like I'm hardly touching that image. And even though that's a very light covering, it's quite vibrant because real red is very vibrant colour. Then I'm just going to go and work up the petals, because you can always add some shadowing afterwards. So you can see how much lighter that is as I go. So I'll just go along the ridges here at the top. And just fan that down. It's just what's left on my aqua painter. We don't want to put too much water on there because, as I said before, it's not watercolor paper we're using. We're just using the shimmery white cardstock, which I do this technique like this quite often. Then just with this stamp, I'm just going to go in where I can see the petals are going underneath other petals, because you want, when you're doing two petals side by side, you need that ink to be dry, because if you don't, it will run. And especially if you're using two different colours, that's when it's more of a problem, because the colours will muddle into each other. And you can see by my palette, I hope you can see that in the frame, that I've hardly got any ink there at all. I'm only just you really don't need that much ink, depending on the stamp you're using, of course. So we're just going to keep on just colouring these petals. And don't worry too much about the colour. I'm not one that can really tell. I don't worry about the light and dark that much. I just add the colour a bit darker at the end where I feel it needs it. And this is quite a vibrant colour, being real red. The rose red that I showed you previously is a lighter red. It's a bit more forgiving. just go back in there. That little petal there goes underneath, so I'm just going to add a little bit and it can dry while I'm doing these other ones. Normally if you look at a flower, it's got a deeper colour in the centre, so these ones on here, I'm just at the moment just getting the colour, some colour onto the petals. And then I can go back in and add more colour. It's always better to do it light because you can always go back in when it's dry. So I've still got ink on that aqua painter, and you can see how some petals I've made a lot lighter than others. And I've hardly had to go back to my paper toweling today. Sometimes if you get too much water on, it will run, so it's best to dab back on your paper toweling if you get too much water on your flower. So we'll just keep going. So I'm not going to go back into the colour at the moment because there's still a little bit there, and I do want these colours, some of them, I want some of the petals to be lighter, although that's getting to be a bit too light. And I found using the shimmery white, you just get a bit of extra sparkle coming through as well, which adds to your colour. So just turn that round and we'll just add a bit more colour on them. Now when you go into, now we're going into the centre of the flower, you need a bit more colour. Now if I was using two different colours, I'd be a bit more careful than I am. So just blending that colour in a bit more. So this tutorial is more to show you how to use your aqua painter and your ink pads. And just try very light-handedly when you're doing this. Don't overwork the areas because we're not on watercolour paper, so you just have to be aware of that. hardly touching that. I've got that little puddle in my ink pad. I'm really milking that colour out today, that's for sure. So we're just going to come up on the other side. So I haven't got that much more to go. Now we've done the big petals. We want to add more colour up here because this like curls under the other flower. Now I'm just going to have to squeeze a bit more ink. That's better because we're in the middle of the flower now, so we want a bit more colour. And you can see how that water, so I'm just dapping that off onto my paper towel because I just got a big blob of water from my palette. But this is such an easy technique. This is just the basic technique of watercolouring. There's just, you know, there's so many other things we could add to it as well, but I just wanted to show you mainly today how to use your aqua painter with your ink pads. Now you can see that I'm going in a bit darker now that that's dried, because that's right in the center of the flower, what we call the throat of the flower, and we just want that to be a darker color, well, a more darker red. Now you can see how light that's starting to come, but that's fine, we'll just add so we've got some color to work with. But we will need to add a bit more to that because it's right in the center of the flower. But just don't be hard on yourself with the colouring because it is craft, and as long as you're happy with the finished product, that's all that matters. And most importantly, that you're enjoying what you're doing. I don't want this to be, you know, so stressful, because it's quite a relaxing technique that you can use. So we'll just add a bit more. We'll finish off these petals. Because we don't have many left. Just get a little bit of colour on them. And just have to be careful on the outside. Don't have, if you have water on your brush, it's going to run. I've noticed in one little spot I've gone outside the line. But I'm not stressing about it that much. Going to add a bit more colour there. And as I keep saying, I'm hardly touching the flower. You know, you just can't be too heavy-handed with it. So we'll just add a little bit more colour there. So it's coming along quite well. It's got about 3 more petals to go. It was a bit more darker than I really wanted it, but that's alright. And just see how I'm just using a flick motion now that I've got colour on there. And you want to have a little bit of shade on your flower. You don't want it all to be the same colour. And I know I've gone outside the line a little bit there, and a trick is that what you could do, you could fussy cut the flower out if it was bothering you that much that you'd just gone outside the line by a hair. I'm sure whoever gets your card will love it, to think that you've gone to that much trouble to make them a card. And just to remind you, all the products I use in my tutorials are all Stampin' Up products. So you can go to my online store, which I'll leave the link for you. All the products I use today are available in that store. I don't use discontinued products, but some of my tutorials, the older tutorials, will, you know, it just can't be helped when things get discontinued. But all my new tutorials have current products. It just depends when you're watching this tutorial. So we'll just leave that there at the moment, and then we'll just bring in the early espresso. Just won't need much of this one. So this, you just tap that off. And I'm just going to go on the inside. It's got a bit too much water on it. Just on the inside, just on the very center, I should say. I'm just dabbing it. That's all I'm doing, is just dabbing it. And you could always add some Winker Stella to your flower once it's dry. Okay, and then we're just going to do the leaves in Old Olive. Just need to give it a good squeeze in the center so that it will make a puddle for me. So just a flick motion. Don't overthink the colouring too much because it's only a small area. Now I'm just going to go up the stem while I've hardly got any ink on there. Because I don't want to go outside the lines if I can help it. And I'm just going to flick, I'm just using a flick motion. Hasn't got quite. So that's so we're nearly finished, just have to do 2 more leaves. So as I say, as long as you're happy with it, that's all that matters. Don't compare yourself to other crafters. That's what I tell my ladies in my craft classes all the time. As long as you are happy with the end product, that's all that matters, and you must be enjoying what you're doing. And Stampin' Up just make it so easy. Like all their products across the range, you can get those colours. So I'll just add a little bit of dark on the top of that leaf and a little bit of dark underneath that leaf, just to add a little bit of shadow. And all those budding artists out there are most probably saying, oh, she's not doing the shadows in the right place, but I don't stress too much about that. I enjoy what I do. I love the Stampin' Up products. So I'm not going to really fill too much more with that. Just add a little bit more colour to that stem. Hopefully I won't go outside the line. So then we just wipe that off, give it a bit of a squeeze, and that's how easy it is to clean your aqua painter. And I've hardly used any water in the barrel whatsoever, and that's most probably could just do just noticed there. It's just a little bit of white showing there. Going to fuss with it too much because tutorial will just go on forever, but you get the drift of it, that it's, you know, you can fiddle with it for quite a while, but I find it very relaxing. So I'm just, so I think that's, every time I say I think that's it, I find another white piece, and I most probably wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it as quick as this if I wasn't doing a tutorial for you. Just a bit darker in the middle. So just clean off your brush, put your ink pads to the side, and that's your flower watercoloured. So we just want that to dry a little bit. So then we just bring back in our top piece. Now this is where you decide whether you want to add ribbon, which I'm not going to in this particular case. It's pretty dry. So I'm just going to, you could adhere that with glue dots, but I'll just pop it on with some snail. Just line it up. Now I'm going to have to take that right to the top of my tempting turquoise colour. Just want it to be straight. So that's turned out quite well. Quite happy with that. Now you could just get your, I've got some real red dots, which you can use your rhinestones or pearls. I'll just put just in a couple of the corners, just to finish it off. Now that just need a little bit of fine tip glue pen, didn't want to undo, the lid was that tight. Just in a very small piece, because I've noticed it's just the adhesive part has come away from the enamel dot. So slippery little devils. I just want it to go straight on that where I've put that, and then just one more. So I hope you'll give this a try with the Aqua painter and also using your ink pads. It's quite an easy technique, and I thank you for spending some of your time with me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Happy crafting.